Geneticists have created a fake origin for the Indo-Europeans. Geneticists use DNA to explain the origin of Neolithic Europe. They claim that this population was Indo-European speakers, but this is false. The Anatolians and Levantine people who settled Neolithic Europe were Cushites from the Nile Valley. These Cushites were farmers who grew millet and were herders of cattle. The Neolithic culture of ancient Europe was African-centered. The research findings in this book argued that the agro-pastoral people who founded civilization in Europe were Cushites from the Nile Valley. The manufactured genetic origins makes it clear that 1. The Anatolian and steppe agro-pastoralists were not Indo-Europeans, and 2. Eurasians and Africans have been mixing and in contact for thousands of years, up to and after the Atlantic slave trade. Wright wrote that the ancestors of East Asian, Europeans, West Africans, and Australians were until recently almost completely isolated from one another for 40,000 years or longer, which is more than sufficient time for the forces of evolution to work. The archaeology and history outlined in manufactured genetics origins of Eurasian prehistory proves that this statement by Wright is false, completely false. The interactions between Eurasians and Africans has been forever. This makes it impossible for geneticists to claim there were 3 distinct continental populations. Absent corroborating evidence that the populations were isolated until recently makes the claim by some geneticists that although race is a social construct, genomics can identify varied races is false, completely false. African and Eurasian people were not separated for 40,000 years. It is false because blacks or sub-Saharan Africans have always inhabited Eurasia and the Americas. So there is no such thing as continental specific genomes for haplogroups. The reality that sub-Saharan Africans have always been in Eurasia, the dating of specific Eurasian haplogroups is impossible because there is no archaeological or craniometric evidence for Caucasians or Mongoloids in Eurasia prior to 3,500 years ago. Ancient DNA, or aDNA, indicates that R1 clades were carried by European hunter-gatherers and European farmers. Villabruna man lived 14,000 years ago in Italy and carried the haplogroup R1b1a. European hunter-gatherers carried R1b1 in Spain and Samara. Many European farmers also carried very R1 clades. The Cushites, they were the ones who took the R1 haplogroup to Europe. The Cushites belonged to the C group culture of Nubia. The Cushites spoke Niger-Congo and Dravidian languages. The Niger-Congo superfamily of languages is the largest family of languages spoken in Africa, according to researchers. Researchers have assumed that the Niger-Congo speakers originated in West Africa in the inland Niger Valley. This is false. This is completely false. The research indicates that the Niger-Congo speakers originated in Saharan highlands 12,000 years ago and belong to the Onanian culture. The Onanian culture is associated with sites in Central Egypt, Algeria, Mali, Mauritania, and Niger. At Nabta Playa, the people herded cattle and cultivated crops. The Cushites cultivated peninsula millet at Nabta Playa 7,950 BC, and they also herded cattle. During the Onanian period, due to the abundant fertility in the wet Sahara, many people herded cattle. Nabta Playa was located on the shoreline of a lake 11,000 years ago. Yes, a lake. It's a desert now, but that area was a lake, was in that area. A center of cattle worship was the Kisibiba, Nabta region in Middle Africa. At Nabta, archaeologists have found the oldest megalithic site dating to 6,000 to 6,500 BC. This served as both a temple and calendar for the African people who lived at Nabta Playa. The Cushites introduced the agro-pastoral tradition to Europe and Anatolia. The Cushites took with them their cattle and peninsular millet. The Cushites used 3 types of pottery. 1, the wavy line pottery, 2, the dotted wavy line pottery, and 3, the red and black pottery. Pottery types 1 and 2 are analogous to European bell, beaker, and corded ware. Yes, the so-called European bell, beaker, and corded ware are just examples of African wavy line and dotted wavy line pottery. The African Sahara and Morocco was a major source for the bell, beaker, and corded ware cultural complex. The proto-beaker pottery dates back to 4,500 BC in the wet Sahara. You see? Douglas et al. Provides a number of radiocarbon dates for the bell-beaker complex in North Africa. We find bell-beaker ware dating to 3,700 BC in Morocco. By 2,700 BC, we see the expansion of the beaker complex into Iberia. The Iberian bell-beaker complex is associated with what is called the maritime ceramic tradition. There are numerous bell-beaker sites in the Sahara and Morocco. A center of the Moroccan beaker complex, ceramics and arrowheads come from the Uinga and in the cave of the Uberid. Artifacts at these sites are similar to Iberian beaker complex forms. The interesting fact about the discovery of these artifacts is that they were widespread across Middle Atlas Mountains. This finding matches Turek, which explains the spread of typically beaker-style, stamp decoration, bell beaker culture, pottery from Morocco into Iberia and thence to the rest of Europe. Even though David Reich, in Who We Are and How We Got Here, argued that the genomic revolution is the study of the human past, which allows population geneticists to write history using ancient DNA, the archaeological evidence discussed here makes it clear that he was wrong. Reich was wrong because the very populations have been in constant communication with each other. That is why this book, The Falsification of European Origins, is so important. You see, it's very important that people know that they are being taught a falseness. They are being taught an untruth. You see, the Indo-Europeans did not originate in Europe. These statistical methods they use to discuss the spread of people in Europe is just made up. This is all made up history, you see. You know, the archaeology shown in the chapters of manufactured genetic origins proves that these people were not Europeans. These people were Cushites. The findings in this book prove that the steppe and Anatolian agro-pastoralist people were Cushites, not Indo-European. This finding was not unexpected. The manufactured history of the Indo-Europeans was made by Reich et al. It was going to end in failure anyway because the geneticists abandoned the archaeogenetic method for total reliance on Bayesian statistics to model prehistory. You see, geneticists are using Bayesian statistics. Bayesian statistics are used to tell people what they want to hear. Archaeology, on the other hand, is factual and explicit evidence of the existence of a people. It is also evidence, explicit evidence, of cultural traditions. The archaeological evidence makes it clear that Western Eurasia was inhabited by Africans. The first migrations to Eurasia from Africa was by foragers carrying R1b1 and the R1b1a haplogroups, who first settled Iberia and Italy and migrated eastward with millet. The second migration of Africans that came into Europe came from the east. These Africans were Cushites, who first settled Anatolia and spread eastward into India, with millet and into the steppe region, and from there westward into Iberia and eventually Britain. The Cushites from Africa that settled Eurasia were Niger-Congo and Nilo-Saharan speakers, who not only carried haplogroups R1b1 and R1b1a, but also R1m269. Again, it is very important that you buy this new book. This new book explains how the history of the spread of Indo-Europeans into Europe is really false. It explains that this was a manufactured origin to give Europeans, Indo-Europeans that is, an origin that they don't really deserve.